Welcome, everyone. We're just gonna wait a minute to get started as everyone arrives to the webinar. Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Angel Hines. I'm the Public Policy Manager here with the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. And I thank you so much for joining us today for this policy update on the DOT proposed rulemaking for safe and accessible air travel. We are so excited to have this discussion on how to have safer, more dignified air travel. So I'll just get started with some brief introductions. And I've already introduced myself. I forgot to give my visual description. I am an African-American woman with brown skin and about shoulder length hair. And I go by the pronouns she, her. So that is my introduction. But if you want to go ahead to the next slide, George. Today, we are fortunate to hear from Kelly Buckland, the Disability Policy Advisor with the U.S. Department of Transportation, Office of the Secretary, and Heather Ainsley, the Chief Policy Officer for Paralyzed Veterans of America. A bit background about them. Kelly Buckland is a person with a disability who has been actively involved in disability issues since 1979. He served for over 20 years as the executive director of the Living Independence Network Corporation and the Idaho State Independent Living Council in Boise, Idaho. Kelly currently serves as a disability policy advisor at the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Secretary's Office. And then we have Heather Ainsley. Heather is the Chief Policy Officer at Paralyzed Veterans of America. Her responsibilities include managing the organization's efforts on Capitol Hill and working with the administration to promote legislation and policies that ensure veterans with catastrophic disabilities receive the health care and benefits they have that they have earned and the civil rights protections they deserve. She also serves on the board of the Disability Rights Bar Association and is an internationally recognized expert on the issues related to air travel access for people with disabilities. We are so honored to have them with us today. But before we get started and hear from them, we are going to kick things off with a welcome. Then we'll have our update and accessible air travel update, and then we will learn more about the DOT proposed rulemaking overview, coalition partners, advocacy around this, and ways to take action. But first up, we will hear from Regina Bly, our Chief Program and Policy Officer with the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. Regina?
Thank you so much, Angel, for that introduction and also the overview of what's getting ready to happen today. I'm absolutely thrilled about this topic. And before we get into it, I just want to, again, thank everyone for being here today, specifically Kelly and Heather for being available to talk about this important topic. For anyone that has a disability, anyone that travels through air, it's important to be able to understand the rules and regulations that are associated. So as Angel indicated, my name is Regina Bly. I am the Chief Program and Policy Officer of the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. I've been with the foundation now a little over 2 years. To give you a visual description, I am an African-American woman who is in their late 40s, and I have on an orange-brown blouse with orangish brown dreadlocks. And I have a background that has a lot of books and trinkets in the background. And I go by the pronouns she, her, hers. So again, thank you so much for being here. So this topic is important for people across the disability landscape as they're traveling, wanting to be able to get from A to B, without having any difficulties in getting it done. And some of you have experienced air travel and there haven't been any issues. Kudos and blessings to you, but there are others that have experienced issues that have happened, and when those instances occur, it's important for you to understand your rights. It's important for you to understand the bills and whatever processes are in place for you to make sure that your air travel is the most dignified and easy way for you to travel. As a person myself, I did not indicate, but I also want to indicate that I have quadriplegia, so I'm a person that uses a wheelchair, and I have very limited disabilities when it comes to hand movement and also the assistance in the upper body. So for me, when I travel, there's a lot of technical issues that need to be associated when I travel. And not everybody understands what's available to you and understanding the rights behind what it means when you travel. So when you are ready to embark on those activities, you need to know what's available and those rules. And this webinar today is going to be able to help you to understand the policies that are active now, some of the things that DOT want to enact, and then also some of the advocacy work around making sure that when people travel, dignity is included, and then also that everybody's able to get to their destination, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So thank you again, Angel, also to Kim and others, Gerard, for putting on this presentation, and again to you, Kelly and Heather, for being a part of this important topic that we're going to discuss today.
Thank you, Regina. Before we hear from Kelly, I just wanted to thank all of the advocates on the call today. So many of you have been a part of this process with us for so many years. Would you mind going to the next slide, please? This has been a top Reeve policy priority for a while now. You know, we have continued to advocate for the inclusion of critical disability provisions in the Air Carrier Access Amendments Act within the FAA reauthorization. And that will hopefully be finalized later this spring. It was extended through May 10th, but we have worked with coalition partners on that. We have continued to support feasibility studies, which would determine possible having your personal wheelchair or scooter on board with you. That is everyone's goal. We have sponsored All Wheels Up's annual policy seminar. We were a campaign partner with the Department of Transportation's public awareness campaign to ensure that travelers with disabilities know their rights. And we helped work with them on developing an accessible video for all to help explain those rights. So this is something that we are definitely passionate about, and why we wanted to do this today, which leads us to the announcement that was made this past February by DOT on the notice of proposed rulemaking to strengthen the implementation of the Air Carriers Access Act. Can you go to the next slide? So on February 29th, they announced this rulemaking, which includes several key areas that would improve air travel for wheelchair and scooter users. And we want to educate you on this because we want to make sure that your voice is heard about these proposed changes. And the comment period is open through May. So we have another month to help you get these submitted, but it's open now, so the sooner the better. But that's enough for me. I will turn things over to Kelly Buckland from the Department of Transportation, so he can just share with us a little bit about the intent behind the DOT for announcing this rule. Kelly?
Thanks, Angel. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here with you. I am Kelly Buckland. I'm the Disability Policy Advisor at the United States Department of Transportation in the Office of the Secretary. And this, we're excited about putting this rule out there, but I can't say a lot about it because it's still open for public comment. But to give you a description of me, I'm an older white male, and I do use a wheelchair. I have quadriplegia, and I have on a cowboy hat, which I always wear. In fact, people don't know me without it. And so with that, I'm gonna just let you all know a little bit about how and why we got here. So this is really one of a series of things that we've been working on at the department to make air travel safer and more accessible for people with disabilities. So one of the first things we did was we issued the Airline Passengers with Disabilities Bill of Rights. And as Angel told you, there's a public awareness campaign around that. But it's a really good advocacy tool for people to use on their own. And it's important for you to know your rights so you can stand up for yourself. Secondly, in July of last year, we published a final rule for making the restrooms on single aisle aircraft accessible. So that some of that's already going into effect. Some of it will not go into effect for 10 years, but that rule is finally done and out there as well. And then this rule, we held a public forum, and we had about 1,000 people attend around making air travel safe and accessible. And so we heard from you what you thought what needed to change about traveling with a disability. And so we took all of those comments and we basically tried to massage that into this rule that we just announced in February. So we hope that we heard you, but what we need from you now is we need you to read through the proposed rule, tell us if we got it right, tell us where we got it wrong, or maybe if we just missed it altogether. We really do need to hear from people about what needs to improve or what needs to happen with this. And with that, I think Heather is going to walk you through the different provisions within the rules. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Heather.
Great. Well, thanks, Kelly. I'm Heather Ansley, the Chief Policy Officer at Paralyzed Veterans of America. I am a white woman wearing black glasses. I have brown straight hair. I'm wearing some dangly earrings today and a springish purple button-down shirt with a pink sweater thrown over me, and I am in my office, and you'll see that I have my blurred background on today. So thanks, Kelly, for giving the overview of kind of how we got to this point. It is something, in addition, as Angel was stating, and also Regina, in addition to the Reeve Foundation's focus on improving access to air travel for people with disabilities, this is something that my organization has also been working on literally for decades, because of the original problems with access that led to the Air Carrier Access Act being passed back in 1986, and then bringing us where we are today, which is still a lot of people with disabilities, particularly wheelchair users and scooter users, having difficulty being able to safely access air travel, and in many cases choosing simply not to fly as the response to the situation. The rule that is currently out for comment is, as Kelly said, is something that is really a culmination of the comments, the concerns of people with disabilities that were included in the public meeting that took place, which was also part of the catalyst for these efforts was, the death of Ingracia Figueroa, a disability rights advocate who had come to Washington to do advocacy. And on her way home to California on that flight, her wheelchair was destroyed and led to situations, and ultimately she ended up passing away. And really the outcry of all of the stories that we all have heard over the years from people who have lived these experiences really just kind of came together in a moment where people were able to say, we have to have change. It has to take place. And the department has now said, okay, here's our thoughts on what some of that change could look like. And now this is our opportunity as advocates to review what they have suggested. And as Kelly said, comment back as to whether or not we think they got it right. If there are things that we feel like maybe they missed the mark, or things that we think are good, but maybe not quite there. So what are some of the things that are in this proposed rule? Well, one of the things is looking at, if we could go to the next slide, airlines' obligations and responsibilities to provide safe and dignified assistance and prompt enplaning, deplaning, and connecting assistance. That's a mouthful. So basically, it would clarify that safe and dignified assistance is the type of assistance you should receive when you need an accommodation due to a disability, that should be an underlying theme, whether you need help in an aisle chair, getting on and off an aircraft, you need guide assistance, whatever that may be, that it be safe and dignified to you as a person with a disability. It would also clarify the type of assistance that folks need when they're being put on the plane, they're coming off the plane, they're getting to a connecting flight, or maybe even moving around within the airport. And there are a couple different chairs. So there's what we typically call the airport wheelchair or the push wheelchair. This is a wheelchair that maybe someone would get in and be pushed by another individual, maybe through the terminal from the check-in to their gate, because walking long distances may be difficult for them. But when it comes time to board the aircraft, they are able to board under their own power, maybe using a cane or other assistive device. Then we have what we call the aisle chair or the boarding chair. And that is for folks who are going to typically need to transfer from their own personal wheelchair onto this device and then use that device to actually get on or off the airplane. So DOT is proposing that if you need that assistance in the push chair, just getting you around the airport, but you have the ability to get around also under your own power, that they would look at prompt assistance as being what they call a totality of the circumstances. And that is, they would consider everything that was going on at the airport that day. Were there a lot of weather delays? Was there a mechanical issue? Was everything situation normal? Like whatever was going on that day to determine, okay, did we promptly assist you? But for those who need what they call physical assistance, and that is, getting on and off the airplane, as they're talking about getting off, the idea is that when the last person who didn't need assistance has now departed the aircraft, that they're saying prompt would be the aisle chair is there and your personal wheelchair is there, and that your personal wheelchair is as close to the gate, the door of the aircraft as possible, unless you wanted your wheelchair taken somewhere else, such as to a connecting flight. And that way, and when you're ready to get off, if your chair is not there and the aisle chair is not there, then that would be an issue with that assistance not being provided promptly. So they wanted to clarify some of those things because safety and dignity is already underlying the rule. There is already the requirement that your wheelchair be returned as close to you as possible or where you want it done, but they wanted to clarify some of those areas. Next one is mishandled assisted devices being a per se violation of the Air Carrier Access Act. So what does that mean? Well, first off, mishandled is defined as it's a wheelchair that gets lost, it gets delayed, it gets damaged, or it's pilfered, which could mean it's stolen. And I know we've had PVA members who have had their manual wheelchairs taken by other passengers, and the wheelchair then has to be located somewhere in the airport. So they're saying that's what we would define as mishandled. So basically we've got a wheelchair that's been lost, it's delayed, it's damaged, it's been stolen. And we're going to deem that as a per se violation of the law. So that means that there would not be a discussion about whether or not the airline is responsible if something happens to your wheelchair. And because it's a per se violation, it means that, you know, for instance, if your wheelchair were unfortunately destroyed, then that would be okay. It's a violation of the law, and the airline could be subject then to administrative penalties for that before your wheelchair being destroyed. That doesn't mean they will actually do penalties, but it means that it would say, okay, we could do that. So that's a change that they really wanted to clarify to make sure that there was no conversation about, well, whose fault is it? If you give it to them and it comes back or it doesn't come back and it's not the way you gave it to them, then we know, okay, who's responsible for that. Next, we have it clarifies and actually provides airline processes for returning a wheelchair, repairing it if it needs repaired, replaced if it needs to be replaced, and to include informing those individuals about, you know, where their device is at in transit, and then allowing them to choose their own repair company if something has now happened to their device during travel. So the rule would say if a wheelchair or scooter is mishandled, which again means lost, damaged, delayed, stolen, then the airline would have to immediately notify you of your right that you can file a claim now for what has happened with the airline, that you could receive a loaner wheelchair that has certain customizations to help, you know, while they're trying to locate your wheelchair, repair it, whatever the case may be. That you have a right to choose your preferred vendor. So whether or not you want to work with the airline's vendor or you want to choose to work with a person that vendor that you normally work with when you need a wheelchair repair. And then to have a complaint resolution officer, which is a trained airline employee who's supposed to be highly trained in the Air Carrier Access Act, available, and then provide you with information about how to contact such a person should you have questions. It would also, to go into a little more in depth, so it would require airlines to notify passengers if their wheelchairs and scooters have been put on the plane and taken off the plane. So not that something is wrong with it, but just where it is in this process. We know that they've gotten a lot smarter in how they track baggage and other things. So now you know where your bag is in the process. Well, certainly we can do that with wheelchairs and scooters. So we would have that requirement. If you show up and they discover that it looks like your wheelchair is not going to fit on the aircraft, so it won't go in the cargo hold, there is a requirement for them to immediately notify you of that. As an aside, due to a recent settlement between the Department of Transportation and United Airlines, United has now added information to their website that provides information about the size of the cargo hold and how that might line up with the size of your wheelchair to determine if there are flights that you can take that would allow them to put your wheelchair or scooter on the aircraft without having to tip it or tilt it to get it through the cargo hole to get it into the belly of the aircraft. If your wheelchair or scooter is delayed, then it would require airlines to transport your device to your final destination within 24 hours of you getting to your final destination. And you could say, I want you to bring it not just to the airport, that was my final destination, but to my home or my hotel. And they would look at if that request was reasonable. And then if your wheelchair or scooter was damaged or destroyed, then again, the airline would give you the option of letting them handle it through their contractor. Many airlines have a company they hire that when an issue happens, you get a referral to that company, and then that company works with other repair shops to then get the device repaired or replaced. They would allow that to still occur. But if you said, I would really rather arrange my own repair. I would rather I have, I feel like I could get this where it needs to be and get it done more quickly. Then you would be allowed to do that. And it would be at the expense of the airline. So, and all of that would need to be done in a reasonable time frame. So some changes that would give passengers a little more information and also a little more flexibility in terms of what to do when there is a problem. To that last note, I can say that one of our elected officials here at PVA, his wheelchair was significantly damaged. And he tried to work with the airline's contractor, and they weren't getting back with him. He was stuck in a hotel bed, and he ended up calling his own repair people, got it fixed well enough so he could continue with his journey. But then he was stuck with the bill. He couldn't get the airline to reimburse him, even though they knew that there was damage. So if this particular rule were in effect, then it would seem like he would be able to then get his reimbursement because he went out and got his own repair because he needed it done in a more timely manner. So in addition to what if something happens to the wheelchair or scooter when it's implaned into the aircraft, we've also talked a lot about the need for better training for airline staff and their contractors. A lot of contractors work for airlines. Even if they're wearing the uniform of the airline, they might be a contractor. And the hands-on training is for both how do you, put a battery-powered assisted device into the belly of the aircraft? Are you properly trained to know what to do to make that process safe for the device, for the person who's trying to put it into the aircraft? But then also hands-on training for the staff, contractors who are assisting the passenger who's now been separated from their device. And do both of those processes include folks that are actually properly trained to do the jobs they're supposed to do? So the proposed rule would say that there has to be this annual hands-on training for airline employees and contractors if they physically assist passengers with mobility devices or if they handle wheelchairs and scooters. They define hands-on to say that is training that is received by an employee or contractor where that individual performs a task, function, or procedure that would be something they would have to do in their normal duties in their job, and it would be in a controlled or simulated environment with the use of a suitable life-size model or equipment as appropriate. Again, that's their proposed definition. They would then require that hands-on training related to assisting the passenger would include how to do transfers to and from a personal wheelchair or an airport wheelchair to aisle chairs to passenger seats, the whole process that has to occur there, proper lifting techniques, how to troubleshoot common challenges that may come up when you're providing this type of assistance, and then also how to use the equipment that is then going to physically assist the passenger with a disability. So do they know how to use the aisle chair? Do they know what those straps are for? Do they know how to properly put them on? These are all the complaints I know that we have heard from our members. This would require them to have training in how to use that device and how to assist the person with safety and dignity during that process. Then we would also have to have, as I said, hands-on training related to common types of wheelchairs and other mobility devices, their features, and then also any equipment that the airline or the airport has to help the workers get those wheelchairs and scooters up into the belly of the aircraft. So if they have lifts or other devices, do the workers know how to use them? Do they have them available? And can they use them to safely then get these devices into or out of the aircraft? And they would have to also have training on, methods for safely moving an aid, including lifting, which is very precarious because we know power wheelchairs are very heavy. If there is a disassembly that needs to be required, do they know how to do that? Do they know how to reconfigure, maybe tilting the back down? And of course, taking direction from the passenger about anything they need to do to reconfigure their chair to try to get it into the belly of the aircraft. Or is there any reassembly that needs to be done? And then, of course, how to secure it in the cargo area, depending on the types of securement that they might have available. And DOT is also asking, are there more specific training requirements they should have versus just these topics? They ask about, safe patient assistance that is involved when you're lifting and transferring an individual that you might find in a medical or other context. Should those be things that are considered? And then we also have the reimbursement of fare difference when an assisted device will not fit on your desired aircraft. Now, DOT didn't give us any language to respond to. They didn't make any suggestions here, but they asked questions and said, is this something we should do? So they said, one, should an airline have to reimburse someone between the fare on a flight on a wheelchair that the wheelchair user took and the fare that's on the flight that they would have taken if their wheelchair had fit? So for example, if you have a smaller airport and one flight a day is on a bigger plane, but the rest of the flights that go in and out of that airport are more on the regional aircraft, so they're smaller. And let's say your device will only fit on the bigger flight. Is that the one that's the most expensive of the day? So it's such that now you have to pay the most expensive flight while everybody else could pick maybe the cheaper flight if that fit into their time. So they're asking, should you basically be able to get refunded for that because you didn't have a choice in the flight you took. You didn't get to shop on price. And that's currently something that there is some availability with that. I mentioned that DOT settlement with United Airlines. If you go to buy a ticket there, you will see a pop-up if you try to get on a flight that it says you're not going to fit. And it has some information about reimbursement. And they're asking, so DOT is just asking, is this something that passengers should have? Should we give them that a consideration since we have a lot of inaccessibility in air travel? They also ask, whether airlines currently would offer to put you on another flight without cost if you bought the cheaper flight and then your wheelchair won't fit. Or what about if you need to go on another airline? Let's say your airline that you bought the ticket on doesn't have any flights that your chair will fit on. Do they need to move you to a competitor? Or even should they look at another mode? If you're in the Northeast, for instance, maybe Amtrak would be the only option. Should they buy that ticket for you? Or even a bus? So basically, what can we do? Because we understand that assistive devices may not fit on aircraft. And unfortunately, because we don't have a lot of good accessibility standards, what does that mean for people who still need to travel and the expenses that they might have due to the inaccessibility of air travel? So those are some of the major areas that we're focusing on. It's not on the slide, but I will briefly touch on, there are two additional items in the proposed rule. One is on onboard wheelchairs. So an onboard wheelchair is how someone in flight might be able to get to a lavatory if they need to have that type of assistance. And Kelly mentioned that last year, the Department of Transportation put out this final rule on single aisle aircraft and an accessible lavatory that will come in the future. Part of that rule was about new standards for onboard wheelchairs. So DOT in this particular rulemaking has published proposed language that would basically require the type of onboard wheelchair that now is associated with the accessible single aisle lavatory would have to be more broadly available in air travel. And they did put a requirement out and they're asking for feedback. So that's one. And then another area that they didn't propose any language on again, but they did ask, they do want comments. And that is in relation to twin aisle aircraft, which already have a requirement for an accessible lavatory, and whether or not the standards that are currently in twin aisles, they've had that requirement since the early 90s. They're saying that those now don't match the single aisle aircraft, and should they? So basically these two issues, the onboard wheelchair and the lavatory, were things that were they kind of come from the final rule that was out last year and some of the changes that have occurred from that. And they also included those in this particular rule. And as advocates, we are commenting on that. Next slide, please. So what are some of the key areas of focus that for advocates? So there's certainly we invite anyone who wants to go through the Federal Register notice and all of the various questions and comments to do so and to provide your feedback. But if you say, gosh, I don't have that kind of time on my hands, well, there are some other things that we hope that you might do. And it's part of this comes because there is a perception that, maybe, and not in the disability community, but there's a perception that maybe, the problems that people have had with, being dropped or, being, their device being destroyed, maybe some of these things are not as prevalent. It just, they're just things that get headlines, if you will. And we want to make sure that that we have a loud and clear message that unfortunately many wheelchair users and people with disabilities as a whole do have air travel stories. And in fact, PVA has promoted a hashtag #FlightMares where people can share their stories. So we would encourage people to continue to share their stories, because we know that even when things in a transfer, nobody gets dropped, maybe there's not a specific issue that happens. It's just a rough process. You're being lifted and moved in that small aircraft. You're being bumped into stuff. It's not pleasant. At the least, it's not pleasant, and at worst, it's unsafe. So we just want to make sure that people understand what it's really like to have to get on and off an aircraft if you cannot walk onto the aircraft. And that goes to, we need folks to tell Department of Transportation, and you can use the comment link that was shared earlier about why better training is needed by the people who are assisting you. And that better training is to stop injuries. It's to stop indignities, and also to stop wheelchair and scooter damage. And if you have your own stories about when something has happened to you, even if you didn't file a complaint, with the airline or DOT, you can use that to explain, why is it important that somebody has had a hands-on training with assisting a person who has a disability, like a spinal cord injury? Why is it important that they know how to get a wheelchair on and off an aircraft without damaging it? And then second, we're hoping that you can explain, if your wheelchair is damaged or your scooter needs to be fixed, in any context, why is it important that be done as quickly as possible? And that what does that device mean to you as you maintain your health and your independence? So why is it important that airlines act quickly to make sure that people can get into the repair process? Number one, they don't break them in the first place. But then if it does, that we can get you into the repair process, that there's a loaner wheelchair that can be available for you, if that's something that you need because you don't have one, and why all of that is important. The goal here is just really to show that these changes are desperately needed because the needs of people with disabilities have for far too long been an afterthought in air travel. Changes not made to accommodate folks, but instead figuring out, well, how do people with disabilities fit into what we already do? and the planes we already have and the spaces we already have versus the other way around, which is what we now see in most other modes of transportation, which is how do we accommodate individuals who are going to bring an assistive device with them so that they can participate just like everyone else. So that's why it's so important to comment. So with that, I'll turn it back over to one of my other panelists for the next steps.
Thank you so much, Heather, that you went over everything. That there's a lot there, and we do have some questions, but I will, if Gerard, if you want to come on camera and just before we start the question, just talk about how they can take action.
Yes. Thank you, Angel. Hi, everyone. My name is Gerard Arnhem. I'm the Grassroots Advocacy Manager with the Christopher Dana Reeve Foundation. I'm a white male wearing a navy collared shirt. I have a brown hair, beard, blue eyes, and I have a blurred background. And I'm in my office today in Washington, D.C. But again, thank you all for joining us. This is a very important webinar, and just thank you to Angel, Kelly, Heather, and Regina for being on the webinar. And thank you to our regional champions who signed up and are joining us today. So as we end, nearing the end of this very important webinar, but I'm here just to tell you what you can do to take action. So like we were talking about, comments on the DOT rule can be made at regulations.gov under the docket number DOT-OST-2022-0144. However, you can also scan the QR code on the lower right side of your screen, and it will take you directly to the comment submission page. All these links will be on our follow-up email, so if you can't scan it right now, that's okay. We'll follow up. You'll have the link in your inbox soon. But like Heather stated in the previous slide, some of the key areas to focus on your comments on should be sharing your air travel experience or #FlightMares. You can do this on social media as well. Like after you submit your comment, you can use that hashtag on Twitter, and you can state what your experience was on the social media platform. You can also write about why better training is needed for airport staff to stop injuries, wheelchair and scooter damage. And also, lastly, you can explain why you need a damaged wheelchair or scooter fixed or replaced as soon as possible to maintain your own health and independence. Like I said, all links will be in our follow-up email to anyone who registered for this webinar. The next point I want to bring up is the second bullet point. We do have an online advocacy platform, so if you would like to be an online advocate change, you can do this by going to our website, reeve.org, under the Get Involved tab, or you can scan the QR code to the lower left side of your screen. And it only takes less than a minute to sign up. So we're trying to get as many advocates as possible. So if you want to, be more involved with Reeve advocacy, please do so and sign up to be an online advocate for change. And if you want to get more and more involved with Reeve advocacy, please consider joining the Regional Champions Program. I'm going to have my contact information on the next slide, so don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested in joining or wanted to find out more information. And for any questions related to the comment submissions or the DOT rule, Angel's contact information will be on the next slide as well. So again, thank you all for joining us. And don't forget, comments are due by May 13th. And I'm going to hand it back to Angel because we do have some time for Q&A. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Gerard. And there was a question about, is there any specific social media platform to use the hashtag on? That was a question from Ann Potts. So Ann, Twitter is definitely one that we use, but you can use that on Instagram, Facebook. A lot of people are on TikTok. I'm not there, but I know that you can use it there as well. So whatever social media that you use to get the message out, please feel free to do so. But if you guys can bring up Heather back on and pin her, we do have a few questions that I wanted to share. So we had two questions, and you did talk about the on board there, but I think this is something that people can comment on. There's a question on how would one get to the accessible bathroom if they cannot walk? And another one is, does dignified assistance include issues such as access to toilets in case the flight is very long? So I think I like that they frame it as dignified assistance in relation to the lavatories, because that could be commenting in two different areas, right?
I completely agree, Angel. And yes, so if you're in flight and need to access the lavatory, if your aircraft has an accessible lavatory, then it is required to have an onboard wheelchair. And you can request that the flight attendant get you the onboard wheelchair, and the regulation requires assistance with the use of the onboard wheelchair to get you to and from the lavatory. Once you get to the lavatory, they do not have to provide assistance inside of the lavatory. The new lavatories that will be coming in the future on single aisle aircraft require, what they will require is to have the person on the onboard wheelchair and an assistant be able to go into that lavatory and then close the door. So you would have the onboard wheelchair, the person who needs the onboard wheelchair, and then an assistant can go in and close the door. What Department of Transportation is looking at in this rule is the lavatories on double aisle aircraft. So there has to be at least one already today on a double aisle aircraft that has accessibility, but it may or may not allow what I just described, a person and the onboard wheelchair and an assistant behind the closed door. And so that's one of the questions they're asking is, should they change the twin aisle to match the new single aisle such that that would always be the case? So there is some assistance getting to and from the lavatory that's available, whether the lavatory is accessible or not. Because I'll also say, let's say you're a person who could take the onboard wheelchair up to the door of the lavatory, and then you could stand and pivot to get into the lavatory. They would have to do that now, even though you can't get the onboard wheelchair into the lavatory. So there is some accessibility and some assistance that's required. But I do think as we do get more accessible lavatories on aircraft, and as people become more aware that that is an option, the assistance people get in understanding what that process is probably going to evolve as well.
Thank you, Heather. Here's a question from Teresa Costello-Lawless. Will the disabled person, like others, have to purchase insurance for the flight to have the guarantee that fixing, finding, or replacing wheelchairs during travel, or is that included in the ticket? I don't
Would
know.
you like me to answer that, Angel?
Yes, I'm not sure I don't know the answer to that, do you?
So right now today, if something happens to your wheelchair and the airline says, yes, this is our responsibility, then they fix it. You don't have to have like a special, I bought travel insurance or I bought this special provision. They already have to do that now. And the limits that apply, so like if they lost your bag, like had your clothes and stuff in it, there are limits like to how much they have to reimburse you. But your wheelchair, it's up to the original purchase price. So the limits don't apply. There is a question in the proposed rule about the role of travel insurance, but it's not required. So if you go today, you get on a plane and something happens to your wheelchair and they say, yes, this is our responsibility, then they just have to fix it.
One of the questions I answered just in the Q&A, just thought I would share, is a comment that was made that said having to wait until everyone deplanes is not viable. especially when you have a connecting flight. So Karen, who made this comment, this is definitely something that you should submit. This is one of the things that they would love to hear from you. Even if you just told your story about that, that is something that I believe that that they would love to hear from you on. All right, we have another comment about from an anonymous attendee who was recently traveling with their son, and they did not have his chair ready when exiting the flight, and we were late to board the next flight. The airline personnel thought it was hilarious. It was just so upsetting. Other than submitting our concerns directly to the airline, to whom do we address this so that something is actually done and not just disregarded? So I would say they should, they can report, there's a phone number that you can report this issues that you have through to DOT. Kelly, would you mind commenting on this? You are on.
Would you mind restating the question?
Sure. So a woman was traveling and she had an issue with the airline not having her chair ready, her son's chair ready, and she was treated poorly by the airline. And she wants to know, other than just commenting through this proposed rule, I believe is the question now. I don't see the question. Where else could she report when things like this happen when traveling? How else should she report?
Yep, she should file a complaint with us at DOT. And because even though we're talking about in this rule dignified air travel, believe it or not, they're already required to do that. So you should still file a complaint with DOT. If you're not treated properly, it still should be a complaint that you would file with us. And file it with the airline as well. Because not having your chair there in a timely manner is also still required. It's also required. What we're trying to do in this rule is make a lot of stuff more clear, where the current rule is a little bit fuzzy, but some of this stuff is already required, like having your chair to you in a timely manner is already required, but we've made it much clearer in this proposed rule. So, and I know that people, I was going to mention this at the beginning, but I know people have grown frustrated with filing complaints with DOT because it doesn't feel like they ever get addressed. But to let you know, the Consumer Protection Division has hired on 8 new attorneys and have also hired some new analysts as well to really hop on the backlog on disability complaints. And all these new attorneys are solely focused on disability complaints. So we really are starting to be more responsive to those complaints. So, and also numbers matter, right? So we would really appreciate it if people do file complaints with us, even though I know it's been frustrating in the past.
Thank you, Kelly. And I put information from DOT's website on where air travelers who experience disability-related problems, the hotline number. So I put that in the chat for everyone to have. And we will also put in the chat where to submit your comments to. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. Let's see here. What is the current ruling about being able to bring a folding chair onto a plane? Heather, are you able to answer that?
Yes. So if you, there are already requirements for in-cabin stowage of an assisted device. So they have to have what DOT calls a priority space. So that could be the closet or a row of seats, actual passenger seats that they would strap the wheelchair to the seats. In the regulation, there are requirements about how big the closet has to be. And it does say that you have to be able, it has to be able to fit in the closet without having to remove wheels or otherwise disassemble it. But I will note that there's another part of the regulation that says if you can remove the wheels or other items without tools, and we know most of the time a wheel, you can push it in and pop it off, then you have to be able to do that if that'll make your wheelchair small enough to stow, and then you can put your wheels in the overhead or, you know, somewhere else that's an approved storage area. You can also have the seat strapping, even if it would displace another passenger, they can do one, and if it will not displace another passenger, you can do two. So there are options for in-cabin stowage. You might have to fight the flight crew on that one. And I think there was a comment about training, because many times flight crews stow stuff in there, their own bags, their coats, whatever. But you do have, that is part of the rule, is that for devices that will fit in the cabin and meet the requirements, they have priority. So just make sure you brush up before you go to the airport, so you know your rights.
Okay. I think there's one more. What about aisle chairs being in excellent shape? Do you wanna, you spoke a little bit about, there is something in the rule that talks about the aisle chairs. Right? Am I remembering that?
Yes, there is. Well, there is the requirement that they be trained on how to use the aisle chair. And what we're going to advocate collectively, I think, is that means you need to be able to spot when the wheelchair is missing a seatbelt or is otherwise not in good repair, such that you get a new one, or don't use it, obviously, if that's going to endanger someone, and that you know that, and you get a new one, because we know that many times the aisle chair is, at best, it's wet or dusty or, dirty. And at worst, it's got stuff falling off of it. So we hear you on that one. And I know that collectively we are going to comment on that.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. They're coming in in the last few minutes, so let me see here. Oh, okay. A few of these are a couple are very specific to flight, like certain flight questions. So I think we can follow up with you separately. On just insurance. I mean, some of the questions, I think you could definitely, you should contact the airline and DOT's hotline for travelers with disabilities, so that they can help assist you in your matters. Or you can also reach out to me offline, and we can try and help guide you through what to do. But there's one last question. The new aerodynamic planes are designed with smaller storage doors and do not fit many power chairs. Why is this permitted? I'm not sure how to answer that one either. Do you have any thoughts on that, Kelly? Oh, you're still muted, Kelly.
I would say that's something you should include in your comments about the rule.
Yeah.
We did address some of the stuff around, they're gonna have to make the size of the cargo doors available to people, so when they book a flight, they'll be able to know whether their chair is going to fit or not. But the thing around multiple chairs, yeah, that's probably a comment you should make back on the rule. Or on the proposed rule.
Yes, definitely. And there's a question about, there's a few things in here about arguing with flight attendants on the closet. Add those to your comments, to your social media posts. There's a lot here that you can share. So Gerard, do you want to mind going back to the slide that has the where, yeah, nope, going where to submit your comments. There you go. So comments can be made on regulations.gov. There is the docket number, but we will include this in our follow-up email. But I also just wanted to give you another chance. You can scan, if you're able, you can scan the code, QR code, and that'll take you directly to the link on where to submit your comments. If you are interested in signing up to be a Reeve advocate, so you can get information as soon as it comes out and help us continue this fight for accessible air travel, please do that as well. And thank you so much to Kelly Buckland and Heather Ainsley, who I know are very busy. I've been on multiple calls with Heather in the past couple of weeks, so I know she is super busy. Thank you all for joining us today.